Thank you very much, Peter and Alan, and of course for you all to coming out today to talk about and hear about and learn about what I think is the biggest challenge that we face in Australia at the moment. Because as Alan said, whether you worry about climate change, whether you worry about where our water will come from, or whether you worry about where our food will be made, or whether you just worry about how decisions are made in our democracy, the invasion of coal mining that Alan just described, I think, is by far the biggest issue facing us in Australia. I'm just going to talk for a few minutes, put a few facts in your head, hopefully. There's a flyer floating around which the Australia Institute produced. It's got links on there to our website. Everything I'm about to say comes from a bunch of radical pinko progressives known as the Australian Bureau of Statistics. You might have heard of them. They're part of a global conspiracy against the mining industry, the ABS, and the other organisation that we draw heavily on is the anti-mining front known as the Treasury. Now, what the Treasury of New South Wales tells us is that virtually everything people think they know about our budget and our economy and the role of mining is wrong. Not because people are stupid, but because people have been misled for decades. According to the anti-mining conspiracists at the New South Wales Treasury, the New South Wales government collects as much revenue from registration of cars and speeding fines as it does from coal royalties. All right, let me just say that again in case there's any ambiguity in this. According to Treasury, the New South Wales government collects as much revenue from car registrations and fines as it gets from coal royalties. Coal is not the bedrock on which our budget is built. In fact, it's a heavily, heavily subsidised industry. We build them their railway lines, we build them their ports, we let them transport their coal through our communities in uncovered wagons. It costs the New South Wales taxpayer a fortune to build the infrastructure that the coal mines can't live without. It is simply untrue to suggest that our schools and hospitals are only open because of the contribution of the coal mines. In fact, as I said, we subsidise them. Put up your hand if anyone here works in the coal mining industry. That's about representative of the Australian economy. Because 1% of Australians work in coal mining. 99% of Australians don't work in coal mining. Now, I don't have a problem. It's a pity someone's not here from the coal industry. I don't begrudge someone their job. And 1% of Australians work in mining, in coal mining. But more people work in agriculture. More people used to work in food processing. But governments who don't care when jobs are lost in agriculture and governments who don't care when jobs are lost in food processing put their hands on their heart and say, but we have to create jobs by approving mining. How ridiculous. Again, if you have a look at the graph on the back of the little flyer, you'll see right down the bottom that the mining industry employs 186 people in this region. 186. 2,297 work in health and aged care. It's rounding error. It's statistically insignificant, the contribution of the mining industry around here. Farming, on the other hand, employs 3 times as many people. So we need to understand that mining is not the bedrock of our budget. In fact, it needs subsidies to keep going. It isn't a major employer, not only around here, even in the Hunter Valley, where I grew up. 95% of people in the Hunter Valley don't work in the mining industry, according to the pinkos at the ABS. Now, you've probably heard that mining jobs, well, that's irrelevant. Not many people work in mining jobs, but they create all these indirect jobs because, you know, the miners go and they spend their wages in the shops. You know, that's true. It is true. Unlike nurses who take their pay packet and flush it down the toilet. And teachers who bury their money in their backyards, never to see the light of day. Of course miners spend their income in local communities, just like everybody else. But the mining industry spends a fortune commissioning dodgy economic analyses to suggest that it creates these huge indirect benefits for everybody else. In the Warkworth case, up in the Hunter that Alan and Peter were talking about, Rio Tinto's economic consultant said that if the mine was approved, this is the one that Alan was saying they wanted to knock the ridge out so that, you know, there'd basically be a direct link between the small town and the enormous mine. Rio Tinto's consultant said that if this mine was extended, it would create 44,000 jobs. Now, there's only 500,000 people in the entire Hunter Valley. My evidence to the court was I'm not quite sure how many jobs it will create, but I think it would be about 0. They started with 44,000, I went with 0, and we won. But those claims had been accepted by the planning department. Those claims had been accepted by our politicians. Those claims had been repeated to people like you in paid television advertisements, in paid newspaper ads. It is not an accident that people think a lot of people work in mining. It is not an accident that people think mining creates all these indirect jobs, because we've had a decades-long PR campaign. And it is inconceivable to me that the well-paid bureaucrats at the planning department didn't know what I knew. And that was a small mine employing a small number of people was never going to create 44,000 indirect jobs in the Hunter Valley. It was an obvious lie, but it persuaded the people who love to approve these mines. So let me just end with a broader point. The mining industry survives by dividing communities. It survives by dividing people within communities, and it survives by dividing different communities. And what Alan was trying to do was to explain to you today that you've got a lot in common with a lot of people all around the state and all around the country. And as long as you feel like you're a small group up against a big industry, then you might feel like you have no chance. But 90% of Australians think water is more important than coal. And 99% of Australians don't work in coal. So your task, politically, it's not about who you vote for, it's about how you see yourselves and how you work with other people. The political task is for you to understand that the fight you're having here is a fight that unites you. Look around. There's old people and young people. People like me who get called greenies. I don't know why, I don't really care. People like Alan Jones, who's rarely called a greenie. You've got farmers, but this is the point. We've got more in common with each other than these silly little distinctions that the miners want to play into. It's not about whether you work in farming or whether you work in tourism or whether you're a pointy-headed academic from Canberra. 90% of the public agree with you in your fight. And those towns all around the state and all around the country are having the same fight. And the last thing they want you to do is to join up with each other and join up with these other communities and say, enough is enough, it's a democracy and we don't want you here. But thank you for having me here. Thank you for fighting the fight you're having, and thank you to Peter and others for organising it.